David Edward and Mick Smith discuss Mick's new book, Burning America.
Mick, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me this morning.
Sure. I can't. There's two of you on there. I see you, and then I see, yeah,
Yeah,
a different version of yourself in a 1957 something, right?
it's a 1957 Buick Special Riviera 46-R. Aren't you glad you asked?
I am
Well, it's
super
usually a
glad. Yeah,
57 Special.
57
There's a
special.
story behind it too, if you want to hear the story.
Well,
That was
yeah. Go ahead.
that was my father's baby, other than mom, and that was my parents' first new car. And my dad has gone on to his heavenly reward, but I keep it in his memory.
Wow, that is so awesome. And now is it your primary vehicle or is it?
Well, no, I mean it's
Yeah, I was curious.
classic
Yeah.
car shows, the Sunday car. Yeah, I mean just special occasions, but it still runs. It's a great car. It's an
Yeah.
American muscle, big V8, like in
Yeah.
the old days.
Yeah. It's one of the. They got really good gas mileage, like what, 6 miles to the gallon, 8 miles to the
Yeah,
gallon.
it might be a little bit more, but not much.
Not much, I know. I've had them. They are fun. The other thing you discover is whatever the shocks are they put in cars have gotten a lot better.
Yes,
In
it
1957.
everything is better. All the engineering, like your background, in cars, but it's a driving experience too, and that's part of the fun of driving it. It's like, there's nothing like it. There's nothing on the road like it anymore.
Yeah, right. It's better today, but it's not cooler. Which
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
And I am one cool guy.
I can already tell you. I told you before. You've outdressed me, so you've already you've already one up me, which is great. So Mick, we're actually talking
Yes, sir.
because very recently, I think just last week, your first book came out. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, I'm a recovering academic, and so I've got something like 87 publications, but this is my first foray into a novel. So yes, it's Burning America in the Best Interests of the Children with a question mark.
With a question mark, yeah, and a heck of a terrifying cover, if I might say so myself. It's and I know you have a background in marketing. It's so brilliant because you almost can't take your eyes away from the book cover. I mean, it's really clever. I really commend you on that. And now, so let's just jump right into it. So in writing this book and set us up, let us know what the book is about. But you mentioned you
Sure.
have 87 or so academic papers, I assume published.
Yes.
So set us up on the book, and then let's talk about the difference in writing a novel versus
Yeah.
an academic paper, because I want to jump into that. But what is Burning America in the Interest of the Children question mark about?
Yeah, it's a story about it's something that I think is across the country, men and women, mothers and fathers, families, children. There's something like 220 million people in the United States who have been impacted by custody affairs. And that's a lot of people. So that kind of explains the cover and the background. And my 2 cents is that I love my country, I love America, and I think America is burning. And why is it burning? Well, because people say there's a cliche, the children are our future. Well, yes, if the children are our future, we better take care of them. And that's the thing that I'm trying to say with the subtitle, in the best interest of the children, and question mark, and to say, there are things that happen in these situations. And this is what I try to say. It's a work of fiction. So it's a novel, but the thing is, all the things that you would think could never possibly have happened in these kind of situations,
Yeah.
that's the true parts. That's what actually happens. And so to bring awareness to this issue and to really look out for the children, that's really, I think, the incentive to write this novel.
And now how did you decide? So, I read the very beginning of it, the baptism story. This thing starts off, and pretty quickly you realize this might be a tough book. How do you balance that? To keep someone interested, and why did you decide to tackle a topic like this for your first book?
Yeah, and I think comes down to kind of your question was academic writing as opposed to novel writing. So I've never written a novel before, and I know grammar. I know how to write verbs and subjects and what have you. But when it comes to academic writing, nobody reads it. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
So
Yeah.
on my dissertation, I may have had 4 people read the thing, right? So it's like stick it in this annex of the library, and nobody reads it. So what I'm trying to do with a novel, of course, is something completely different, and it's attention getting. And I hope from the novel itself, the cover, and all the things that go into it to say, look, I'm trying to shake people and, wake them up. I mean, this is something that's a really serious issue. And if there are that many people and children that are impacted negatively, I'm trying to bring awareness and what they used to call in the 60s, raise consciousness. I mean, this
Right.
is something that really affects America as a country. And to see what has happened in those stories, that you find that children don't have access and equal access to either a mother or a father.
Yeah. So, what does someone other than being entertained, what does someone get out of reading this book?
Well, I hope that they see all the things that can go wrong. So I say, if I could reach one person with this book, it's like I feel like I'm very successful at it. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you're in this situation or you're thinking about going to this custody court situation, I would caution you,
Mm,
it may not turn out as good as you would think. And what people do is they're a little angry at the other person. And unfortunately, the child or children are stuck as the football in between.
yeah.
Or maybe they're in this situation now, or you've been someone who's been keeping the other partner out of the children's lives. And hopefully the novel would say, well, maybe you really shouldn't do that, because kids should have 50-50 access and should have the benefit of the other partner as well. As angry as you are with them, and they know they may squeeze the toothpaste from the middle of the tube as opposed to the end, and it drives you crazy, and everything about them you don't like, but don't take it out on the children, because they didn't ask to be born, but you need to prepare and do everything possible that you can for those kids.
How did you research a book like this?
Yeah, and I think it was from stories, and that's why I'm saying the things that's in this novel that I think people would read this and go, that can't possibly happen. I go, those are the true parts, because these are things that
Yeah,
actually happen.
right,
Because if it were just this normal, average, ordinary day or story, then I would have no story. But
right.
these are the things that actually can and have happened. And that's why I try to include them, because people have read it and they've said, even when I'm going through the publication process and people say, well, that's not right, that doesn't happen. I go, well, yeah, that's why it's in there. I mean, that's what gives it a story,
Right.
because you just can't believe that things happen. So the way it starts out is, person Paul is the protagonist here, and he pulls up in the driveway and everything's gone, like literally everything. And he says, well, okay, I can replace the bank accounts that were stripped, I can replace the furniture, I can replace all this, but how do you replace a child? The child is gone. And the way he finds out that where the child is the family that's living in Pennsylvania. And he finds out over the police radio, where's the child? And over the police radio, trying to track the child down, he hears California. And that should make an impact on person. How would you feel as a parent to find out that your kid is 3,000 miles away?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, so it, and it moves along. I mean, clearly you know how to write. A lot of times people in their first novel, they have a great story, but the mechanics aren't necessarily there. That was my
Yeah.
case for sure. But that's not the case for you. I mean, no, you a very compelling story. Walk me through. There were 2 days in this book at the beginning. There was the day you decided to write the book for real, and then there was
Mhm.
the day you started writing it for real. What happened in between those 2 days?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, see, the story is set some years ago, and what really pushed me over the edge, because I actually had the idea of writing this somewhere around 1995, 98 or so, the late 90s, and sat on it for a while. And I thought, well, it's a pretty good story, but like a lot of people, it's like, I'm an academic, I'm doing other things, I'm running a business, and I didn't really think about it. However, more recently, people started coming to me to say, well, yeah, I mean, that happened to my cousin, my brother, my sister, my mom, my neighbor. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is probably a larger problem. And I've talked this story. So I said, well, I mean, I should take it off the shelf and say, now's the time to do something with it, because although it's set a long time ago, it's something that has continued over quite a few years. And so that's what really said, I've got to take it off the shelf, and found a really good publisher and found it's like, I need to get this out.
Right, right. So when you entered the writing process, did you like have a time you wrote, like in the morning, the afternoon? Did you write on a word count? Did you just write on a block? How did you progress from the start of the book to actually finishing? We all know it's easy to start a book. It's really hard to
Yes.
finish a book. So how did
Yeah.
how did you structure that?
And it was a key, because I think one of the most important thing is, because I've got a house that I rent out these days, but I remember it because it really made sense. Like I said, well, how do I write? Just to answer your question.
Yeah.
I said, I took a big piece of paper, And I started reading books about writing and about novels, like how do you write dialogue, how do you develop characters? And, I'm an academic, so I'm going to do research. Like, how do I do this? And I took a big piece of paper and I just drew a picture of here is this story, and it keeps getting more and more intense, and then it hits a climax part, and then the denouement, the end, and what to wrap it up. So I took it visually and wrote it, and I go, okay, well, here's the story. I see it on my wall, but I've now got to put words to the story. And to answer your question specifically, yeah, it wasn't easy really, because I was a full-time single father at the time. So it's like, I had, a heavy burden here because I got a kid and I got to take care
Yeah.
of this child. But generally it would be after her bedtime, and it would be in the evenings. And I know I was thinking about it, processing. It's a process I call percolating. It's ideas in my head and they percolate. And I go, oh, yeah, that would be a good point. And so thinking about it and then having the opportunity to sit down and actually write it out.
Now, how long did it take, kind of from the first
But
word to the last?
yeah, about 2.5 years.
Wow. Okay, so this
Yeah.
was a big commitment.
It was, but I said, if again, going back to the academic side of it, I remember when I was writing my dissertation, there's a great book, and the title is How to Write a Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day. And it's a
Yeah.
great title because when you have this huge project like a novel or anything else, if anybody is thinking about doing this kind of thing, you get overwhelmed. And I say, well, you got a big project, but what you can do and what you should be thinking of is how do I write in 15 minutes a day, meaning 15 minutes of productive, really essential things that you want to make sure are in your story. And if you can do that, well, then you're going to get finished. So you can't get overwhelmed with it because you can't write it in a night. You can't write it in a week. You can't write it in a month.
Yeah, you just can't. You can want to, but you can't. Yeah.
Yes, you can want to,
Yeah.
but can't be done.
Now, did you find you would go back and read what you had written and edit it while you were getting ready to write new stuff, or like how did you just keep the continuity in writing from day to day?
I think that visual is what I
Okay.
kept
Yeah.
saying. I kept saying, all right, I've got to keep moving a story along. So if you read through the chapters, each chapter is leading to the next. And it's almost like I end one chapter and the hope is there's a person going, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen? So to turn the page to find out what's going on in the next chapter. And so the story is driven along, because with any great novel, like, a great novels of the 19th century, the British novels, I love them. Its story keeps moving. And that's the thing with a lot of conflict, which is really key. That's the thing. Like if you watch a movie, I'll give you an example. Every time you watch a romance, notice with a romance movie, every single time the two characters at the beginning seem to hate each other, you know where this is going, right?
Yeah.
Because unless you have conflict, you don't have a story. And with this, in a sense, it was very easy because there is a lot of conflict. So I kept saying, well, you got to keep moving the story along. There's one conflict after another conflict after another.
Yeah, conflict. Yeah, that's not the challenge wasn't having enough, right? The challenge was probably figuring out how much was the right amount.
Yeah, and pushing it down. Yeah.
Yeah, keeping okay, interesting. So the book's been out 5 days, is that right?
Yeah, like
Something like that?
officially, but yeah, I
Okay.
had pre-release, and I've been talking about
Okay.
it to people privately, but yeah, it's really been officially released now.
So okay, so it just kind of came out and it's doing
Yep.
pretty good. I see it on Amazon, some Barnes and Noble. Looks like you've got it kind of everywhere, which is great. Is there anything now that you have a non-academic, an official book out, now that you're actually an author, not just a writer or a recovering academic,
Academic.
as we joke? Is there anything that surprised you about the release of the book? I know you're still kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I think it's people that have had some reactions to it and some positive things. I mean, complete strangers, and the fact that I said earlier in the interview is that I wanted to reach people and get their attention, basically shake them up if I can to be aware of this issue. And then they're complete strangers, have written something or reviewed and it's like, you got to read this. This is a must read. Well, that's like, wow, that's pretty awesome. I guess somebody is
Yeah,
reading, you know what I mean?
yeah, that's
Complete
great.
stranger. But
Yeah,
I took a little bit different tact with it. What most people do in writing is they write something or they have an idea and they show it to their friends and family. I did just the opposite. No one read it. I didn't show it to anybody. I didn't give it to my mom so that my mom would say, well, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. Like, thanks, Mom, but what else are you going to say? So I didn't give it to anybody. So nobody read it. It was completely my own idea. And then I said, this is what I want to do. And then you find from strangers and people that you have no idea who they are, but then they have a positive response about it.
Yeah, look, I think you nailed it. It's a very polished book. It's certainly an important topic. Do you have another book in you? And this isn't the kind of book that has a sequel and a sequel, but I mean, are you working on something else?
Yeah, because good question, actually, because I have thought about a potential sequel. And so some have asked about that. I actually have two other books in mind, and that's going to be along the theme of burning America, which is why I'm going to keep that theme.
Yeah.
So there's probably three areas I'm very concerned about. That's family. And so this is the family burning America version. Then I want to do something as the academic part of me and background in history. So something about history. Again, we got to be paying attention. America is burning. So burning America again theme. And then companies and how we're really in our work life. So those three different areas will all fit into that general theme of burning America, of three things that I'm very passionate about and have a background and could talk about. But another interesting angle is I'm currently writing a screenplay based on the novel. So that's my current project. And that's the one I'm working on currently.
Well, good luck with that. Screenplays are a whole different beast. And then you have to pitch it, I assume, right? To get someone interested in it. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, so would you have any advice for someone who maybe thinks they have a book in their head? They haven't written a book, but they want to get structured. Because I did the same things you did, by the way. When I first decided I want to start doing this, I found books on writing. I found YouTube videos and stuff, and I tried to figure out how do you do it. Now, for me, the reason I'm doing these podcasts is because kind of the generic stock information that I got didn't work for me at all. In fact, it was a nightmare to kind of do it the classical way. So, I want people who've actually finished books like yourself to be able to give advice to people that are wanting to do this, because it might be different than what they can just find in a generic search.
Mm-hmm. Yes, every human being born is a unique creation of God. So I would just say bluntly and shortly, everyone has got a story. Because you do. You're a unique person. You're a unique creation. There's never been anybody like you in history previously, and there will be never anybody like you after you. So one of the things that I do is I am a digital marketer, but that also means I go into voice talent work. I do audio books, and I'm a podcaster. And what I would say is you've got a story, and the story that you have in you may be the key that unlocks someone else's prison. And you need to get that story out. So if you need somebody to read it, you need a voice talent, great, I can help you there. If you need somebody to help with the writing process, I've got a background in writing, I can help you there. If you want to go into podcasting, again, everybody's got a voice, everybody can get a microphone, everybody should be telling their story.
Yeah, and you're very eloquent, I think we just found out too. So I think you're a good person to know, Mick.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Sure. All right. Well, look, thank you very much for your time on this. And if you get working on a second book, or just if anything interesting happens, let me know, and we can do a follow-up podcast.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.